part of a set of resources that complement environmental impact assessment, we're going to talk about environmental management systems today. So this is a set of 3: environmental management systems, environmental auditing, environmental risk assessment. And environmental management systems can be seen as kind of the overarching organisation, if you like, and risk assessment and auditing should fit into an environmental management system. So in essence, an environmental management system is described by the figure that you see here. It's about having clear direction or policy planning. So the yellow arrow, it's about putting that into place, the pink arrow. It's about checking that it's working, the green arrow, and then depending on the results of the check, changing things, so acting on your check and going around and around. So on the inside circle here is the continuous improvement that is supposed to occur as part of an environmental management system. So risk assessment, I've got a picture here that you can partly see of my local rivulet, Sandy Bay Rivulet. So this is risk assessment, talks about the negative things that might happen as part of environmental works, as part of a program or a development, and thinking about how you might change those risks so that, for example, plastic ending up in the diluent, you might put in physical systems to trap the waste as well as trying to avoid the waste getting there in the first place. Environmental auditing has been a core part of this unit for quite some time. Here's a photo of students in this unit 2 years ago now doing an external audit, a really messy audit of the 32 external waste bins around the Sandy Bay campus. So auditing and risk assessment will be recorded separately. So environmental management systems are sometimes done as part of a development and environmental impact assessment, but generally you can think of environmental impact assessment being used to forecast the proposed interaction between the development and the environment, and then environmental management systems more often being used on existing development. So the 2 photos here are a proposed work in the north of Tasmania. You can see here the red boundary on the block here and the impacts that are going to occur, the predictions of the impacts that are going to occur on the native vegetation here, and a picture of Nearstar, which is the zinc works at Lutana in Hobart. And zinc works have a variety of environmental improvement processes as part of their management system. So an environmental management system is quite commonly in place in a big organisation, and it helps this ongoing improvement. So it's basically the management of environmental programs in a comprehensive, planned and documented manner. Documented is really important. So you're actually measuring things and writing them down and checking to see what's happened. And it needs to have particular elements, even if it's quite informally done. You need a policy. You need to know where you're going. You need a clear structure for the process. People who are involved need to know what's going on. That's where the training comes into it. And it needs to be maintained. It's not something that you just plop into place and then don't do anything about. So there's an idea for Milo here at the bottom: find an environmental management system for an organisation that interests you. You might not be able to see all of those words. Does UTAS have an environmental management system? They don't. We don't. But we do now have the ingredients, and this has changed in the time that I've been teaching this unit, 12 years. I've been teaching this unit. We now have most of the ingredients. So when we first started talking about EMS in this unit, there was no policy around environmental management, and we have that in place now in various parts of the university's core documents. And then you can see here from the sustainability page all of the different components that are typically part of an environmental management system. And for most, not all, but for parts of transport, waste, procurement, energy, we have pretty good evidence that there's kind of this ongoing improvement and investment. Not so much for natural environment. Some of it's a little bit patchy. So we don't have a management system, but we could. I'm a bit jealous of the University of Queensland, who have had an environmental management system in place since 1996. So when you Google Australian University EMS, they pop up. And yeah, it's really beautifully done. I don't know a lot about how it works on the ground, but it's very convincing in terms of their webpage. And yeah, all the documentation is there, and they appear to be checking. Why is an environmental management system needed? So it's the alternative, I guess, is just to rely on what you legally can and can't do. And so obviously everybody needs to comply with the law. But if that's all that's happening, then you can get some pretty poor environmental outcomes. And it also, for this to work well in terms of legislation ensuring good outcomes, there needs to be enforcement. So if people aren't doing the right thing, then you've got poor enforcement, then, and which is a serious problem in Australia, you get worse performance, and it really takes something bad to happen for the community to start making a fuss and for politicians to get involved. If you've got good enforcement, it's still only able to enforce that legal limit, for example, with a particular pollutant. So it might still be not a particularly desirable outcome in terms of environmental impact, and getting change is very slow and tedious. So the two things work hand in hand. There's what is legally allowed to be polluted or damaged, but then there's also this process of environmental management system where either on a voluntary or a situation where courts have told you you've got to have an environmental management system, you get this commitment to ongoing improvements. When it works well, it can be fantastic. So this is the key, this cycle where environmental management becomes part of the day-to-day of an organisation, and it's part of policy and long-term planning to get good quality improvement in our environmental outcomes. And it can be on this continuum. I know some of the words are covered up here, where it's just a very simple plan and checking, and it's informal and not particularly sophisticated, through to a very comprehensive plan that is certified under international standards. So here are the main ingredients as per the Australian and New Zealand standards. So you start with a policy. That's part of a plan. So the policy is worked into an actual implementation plan. It's implemented, and you check on how things are operated, you review the results of those audits, data, and you commit to this ongoing improvement. So you'll see variations on these ingredients and this continuous improvement, but all saying much the same thing. Why adopt an environmental management system? So sometimes it's because people have to. So because a company like Nearstar that is quite old now, so this is the Zinkworks in Hobart, it has to comply with various environmental protection notices, environmental improvement plans, environmental infringement notices. And so there's an element of this that is being imposed by the EPA. And so yeah, this is their permit, part of their permits to pollute. So there's a minimum that has to be done depending on the business and who's involved and what they want to get out of it. You can improve environmental and economic performance by doing more. Obviously, the more you do and the more money you spend on this, then you get better outcomes, but it is this balance between investing in things that cost more. Auditing and checking can be a costly thing to do properly. So yeah, you get this gradient from bare minimum through to what we're calling efficiency experts and visionaries, where you have life cycle analysis of particular products. That's what LCE stands for. Things are efficient. Sustainability is built into business models and plans, and these are kind of top performers. So you don't need to dig very hard into environmental management systems before you find ISO 14001. So ISO 14001 is probably the most commonly used environmental management system standard. There's a video here that I'll link somewhere where I'm posting this video so that you can go to it. But if you Google ISO 14001 International Standards Organization, that's what ISO stands for, it'll come up. It's been there for a while. It's been played thousands of times. So it's an international organization. It's been around for a long time. It's very commonly used because it's flexible. It's also it's an actual certificate. So it's part of a product, and so there's certain quality controls that go on. So if you are ISO certified, it's a bit like Forest Stewardship Council certification on wood products. You're buying a certain quality. So that's what the benefits are supposed to be. Thank you for people who've already posted on this. Dimitri published some comment on one of the papers that's in Milo as a reading. So ISO 14001 is a very widely used guideline and standard. It's an international standard. It's used all over the world, and it goes through all of these ingredients of policy, targets, operations, implementation, checking. So it provides this format, and it provides training for people to certify people to get ISO 14001 so that you hopefully get this ongoing improvement. Another really good post from Milo of a diagram that I liked that had some of the benefits of environmental management systems. So hopefully you are saving money and lowering risks to all sorts of things as part of this. It's not just something that you would do because the EPA told you to, that you're actually helping to make people safe and making the environment better. You might be doing it for greenwashing purposes, or hopefully it's not greenwashing, you're actually improving things and projecting a more positive corporate image. We'll get into some of these a bit later on. So ISO 14001 is part of a range of different products, if you like. So auditors get certified themselves. So ISO 19000 is part of a suite of products where you check companies, and so you pay to get trained, and then companies employ you to come and ISO 14001 audit them. There's a series around labelling, around life cycle assessment. So these are all a little bit peripheral to what we need to talk about today, but yeah, this is quite a big package of all sorts of things, including greenhouse gas protocols. This one, ISO 14064, is an offset protocol, so it's not, unfortunately, about not polluting, but about offsetting that pollution. And you'll notice that these are updated, and there's a year attached to when they were issued. A reminder too that there are readings in Milo. Thank you again, Dimitri, for reminding me that this was here. So there's a paper here from a little while ago now talking about the value of ISO 14001. So it is important that we tap into the academic literature here, and you will be rewarded for that in Milo if you do that. You know, what are the ups and downs of these systems? It's more than just ISO. There's, as I said, Forest Stewardship Council for wood products. There's more than one wood standard, so it's not just FSC. Some of them are more well known than others. Marine Stewardship Council, Friends of the Sea. So depending on what the product is, there are various standards and products around that you can use to put a system in. So why would a business introduce an environmental management system? Well, there could be a whole range of things, and hopefully they're doing it because they want to create a better environment, but it might be a bottom line thing that in implementing an environmental management system, you've got less waste, you're more efficient, you might be avoiding a fine, somebody might be telling you to do it, either through a court order or some kind of environmental improvement notice that the EPA has issued you. You might be reducing your insurance costs by having these systems in place. If something does happen, being able to show that you've got these systems can help you show due diligence. And this is important if you're the responsible officer on site. It might be about your public image, so it might be less about the function of the organisation but how you appear. It might be part of marketing, so you might be after a public perception of the organisation as being efficient and environmentally friendly. Hopefully this is part of a genuine reduction of impacts that you have on residents' local environment. So the reason for putting these logos here is that a company sometimes gets forced into it by another. So Qantas, as part of their environmental management system, requires their suppliers to be ISO 14001 accredited, which means that if you're going to sell your products to Qantas, you need to be certified. So maybe it's a bottom line business decision rather than anything else. So yeah, it can be made mandatory by the courts. So if something's happened, this might be something that's forced on you. It can be something that, so Saab, I've got this in here because they were quite early off the blocks in terms of putting in ISO 14001 in 1993, I think. General Motors, all sorts of actual material products, but also experiences can have ISO 14001 accreditation. So I've got the photo of Angkor Wat in Cambodia and a national park in Newfoundland here because these sites are ISO accredited, which means that anybody who's supplying to the site also needs to be ISO 14001 accredited. So the concessions, the people, anybody supplying foods or products in Grossmore National Park needs to have ISO 14001 accreditation. So what is it? It's a certification process that shows that you've done this, that you've got an accredited auditor come in, have a look on site. So this is the pre-audit. What do we want? What's the business like? What are we producing? Where are we getting things from? At some point unknown to the company, the auditor will come back. It's important that it's not announced so that the auditor hopefully catches the organisation in just a kind of a routine day and they're not having prepared specially and cleaned up the site for the audit. And then the auditor commits to surveillance audits at some reasonably regular interval, again, not telling the company exactly when they're coming in. And certification, once you've got it, lasts 3 years. So if you want to keep it going, you will need to go back for recertification. So depending on what is required, what the audit asks you to do, this can be quite an expensive process. Thank you so much to Rhonda Mortimer, who did EIA a while ago now, but was a qualified ISO and a few other labels, Friends of the Sea qualified auditor. And so the year after Rhonda did EIA, she came back and gave this lecture. So thank you, Rhonda, for all these slides that I'm still using. So this is what she's looking for. She is not just doing a site audit, but looking through all of the company's paperwork to make sure that there's a policy around committing to ongoing improvement and the specific actions that come out of that policy. You know, what does that mean on the ground? So this was part of a carpet factory audit, so an actual job that Rhonda had done, and this was part of her impacts register. So what aspect was she looking at? What was the impact? What was the relevant legislation? What were the management controls that were in place? And so she does a very thorough, detailed examination of what's actually going on, what any kind of legal limits that the company needs to adhere to, and writes a report. So here's what the company's committing to. We've got this policy. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's our objectives and targets. So it needs to be SMART goals, strategic, measurable, realistic, time-bounded, and we've implemented them, and we check to see that they're working. So the implementation is really important, because it's all very well to have your paperwork in order, but unless people are trained and they know what to do. So this is a photo here showing a spill containment kit. So unless everything's kept in a place where people know where it is and they know how to use it, it's all a bit useless. So the operation, it needs to say who's responsible, is everybody competent and aware, do people coming onto the site know about this? So all of that pernickety work that needs to be done to make things work, particularly in a stressful situation where there's an emergency, this all needs to be well known to all of the actors involved. And finally, the checking that lets you go around and around. So making sure that the management processes are there, operational controls are there, any corrective actions that are there. So it's not enough to just identify a problem. You need to fix it and keep going around and improve. So obviously EMS is about ongoing improvement, but it can't guarantee that there isn't going to be an incident. It does show that the company's thought about it and is prepared, and that might help them in terms of fines and any kind of liability. It doesn't guarantee compliance. So a big existing business like New Star is often polluting above the recommended or the legislated limits, and they have permits to say that this is okay because they were polluting before legislation came in, and they're still working to get up to scratch. So just because you've got an environmental management system in place doesn't mean to say that you're always going to comply with limits and standards. It's no guarantee against fines, although it provides a little bit of insurance. It can't enforce goodwill and team effort, so unless socially it's managed well, sometimes it all comes unstuck. And in some cases it's compulsory, but most of the time it's voluntary. So it can, which is the flip side of some of these, help demonstrate compliance. It can improve efficiencies and reduce costs. It's a way of thoroughly thinking through things in an evidence-based way. It can result in buy-in. It might improve your competitive advantage, your image. It might help you meet your supply chain requirements. That might not be something that you do. It might be forced on you. It might be something that's personally important to a manager, to a company. And it might be something that's formally done through an internationally recognised or locally recognised standard. So hopefully this, although it's been quick, gives you a good idea of what environmental management systems are, and specifically what ISO 14001 is. ISO 14001 is a way of certifying that people have got an environmental management system in place that's been checked by an independent auditor. So not just something that's done in-house, it's got international certification. It isn't going to protect against everything, but it's a commitment to a policy and a structure and training and maintenance that's required for environmental protection.